Starting as always with just settling in and taking a few moments to do this, to sort of remind ourselves what that actually means. So, I've talked about bringing that awareness of your posture to the front of your attention. We can feel our weight sinking into the chair, maybe notice our breathing if that's appropriate, and so on and so forth. And just recognizing the effect. Because I think quite often in our lives, we don't recognize this. We don't have a sense of what it means just to take those few moments of settling. I think one of the things that Tai Chi can show us is that these moments of settling are not in opposition to the moments of activity, but are very much a part of it. And that we can begin to normalize this quality so it becomes a more regular part of our lives. So just thinking about your posture, have your feet down and sit up in your chair. Don't strain to sit up. At the moment I'm sitting back, so I'm using the back of the chair to support my back. What we want to move towards is this, being a little bit forward in the chair, so feeling that support from our feet. But in the first instance, this isn't so much about getting the correct posture as it is knowing what it's like to be aware of our posture. You can't change something that you're not aware of, and you can't change something that you're kind of whizzing past. So, whichever posture you're in, just recognise that this is your posture for the moment. And yes, we may want to move it on from here very gently, as always. But we have to recognise the starting point. So, just rubbing your hands together. This is another good exercise for just building up that picture in the front of our attention, starting with your face, tapping lightly the pads of your fingers over your face. And over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And on the other side. And then the upper part of your chest. Onto your belly. And down your legs. So, let's remind ourselves of the posture that we want to try and cultivate. See, slightly angled forwards, and that little bit of pressure in the soles of our feet, that sense of our legs being slightly compressed, about a third of your weight in your feet is a good sort of proportion to aim for. Just be careful that you don't just start to stiffen up in your back. And then going through just a few simple movements as always, turning your head a little bit from side to side. And one of the features of the postures that we take is that we begin to generate a sense of space within the body for movement. And we move within that space. But to recognize that, we have to have a degree of awareness, a degree of stillness, because it's very subtle, it's hard to make these calls. So the stillness, and we could substitute calm, quiet, relaxed, all sorts of words for that, actually is essential to the movement. It's not a luxury. Hands in front of shoulders, circling your elbows around, and just noticing where, apart from your shoulders and your arms, of course, you feel movement taking place in your body, your back, your chest, your side, wherever, so that we begin to broaden out our awareness of what the movement entails, and we can bring a degree of intentionality to this. We intend to open the chest, to let the chest contract, and that takes some of the emphasis away from purely the shoulders and helps to generate this smoother movement, because the effort, the load is more distributed through the body. Going forwards, hands down to your sides, out slightly, rotating your arms. And again, this is perhaps a little bit more subtle than the previous exercise, but we can begin to associate rotating our arms with these subtle changes in the chest and upper back, for instance. These aren't necessarily set in stone. What we learn is what's happening, and we also, with experience, pick up a degree of discrimination. What is actually helping the movement? What might be blocking the movement? Winding around. And then back the other way. So now we bring our attention to the middle of our body, hips, pelvis, waist, the actual physical centre of the body, and just tilting the pelvis forwards so more of your weight goes forwards, and then pushing down through your feet to come back up. So now, when we bring an awareness of the central part of our body to the front of our attention, actually what we're doing is placing our attention in a place where we can actually be aware of the whole body. As you go forwards, there's this feeling of the legs being gently compressed, like getting a bendy stick and pushing it in, and then we don't want the stick to snap. There comes a point of resistance where we let the legs open up a little bit, expand a little bit. As that happens, we feel our feet being pushed into the ground, and at the same time feel our shoulders being pushed back. We have a direct physical experience of the body moving as one unit. And within that unit, we start to be able to recognize the flow, the movement of the energy, and to bring a degree of awareness and a degree of intentionality to all of these things. So that process that starts with the foregrounding of our attention to our body, our awareness of our body, has now enabled us to engage more fully with the movement. In terms of our awareness, we want to try and just have a slight bias towards the lower part of the body, because we're more often than not more aware of what's happening in the upper part of the body. But ultimately, there's this lovely phrase in the Tai Chi writings: when one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion. A sense of a gathered quality of both mind and body. This goes a really long way towards helping to generate a sense of well-being, a sense of calmness in our minds. And it's one of the great benefits of the art. This time when you come back, you turn. And now this directs the movement. So the turn is deliberate, it's intentional. And so now we're directing the movement, the flow of energy in a particular way. These are processes that I used all the way through this system. And we're learning what's involved in them in very simple movements. We are, of course, at the same time exercising, where we're releasing the joints, we're getting the muscles warmed up, and so on and so forth. So, again, everything that we do in Tai Chi, it works through the three elements of mind, body, and energy. Turning slightly, the other way, making that distinction between the leg that the weight is going into, which we would describe as the full leg, and the other leg, which we would describe as empty. There's a distinct difference, and this becomes very significant in standing exercises. And it's very significant in our daily lives in things like walking. And you go forwards, you turn in your hips, and that brings you across. You roll back into the hip behind, you turn to go across the other side, you roll forwards. And that movement in the center of our body draws our shoulders and our head around in a nice, smooth, flowing circle. Don't make it too big, try not to stiffen up in, for instance, your back or your spine. So an almost sort of gentle, swirly feeling, like water flowing around through your body. Go back the other way. The movements sometimes described as though you're being massaged on the inside of your body, so you're being bathed in the energy. Coming back to the central position, and then raising one foot, step out, put your heel down, lower the ball of your foot, gently press the foot into the floor, feel the contact with the ground, like that. So as we go through these movements, different aspects of what we're doing come to the foreground. The background remains. There is background awareness of our body, our posture, and so on and so forth, remains there and remains intentional. It might not always be in the front of our attention. This time, having planted the foot, tilt forwards and then back and then forwards. Planting the foot and then transferring the weight. We'll try the same thing on the other side. First of all, stepping with what we would call an empty step. Remember, if we practice these things enough, they become habits. So then they seep into our daily lives. The way we walk, the way we step, become more normalised for us. That sense of stillness, that sense of calmness becomes normalised. And then your weight following. And rather than associating stillness with doing nothing, we realise it's an essential part of doing something. And then alternating from side to side. How does your body accommodate this? It would need to move across a little bit. So some of the weight comes out of the foot. You'll probably find that you're turning in the centre of your body. But you might find something different. You might find, for instance, here, that it's your shoulders twisting around. You think, hang on a minute, that's not right. So again, we can begin to bring a degree of discernment to this. Coming back. So as we get into the movements, that picture, that awareness of our body that we've had sort of in the forefront will recede a little bit. but it doesn't disappear. And remember that what I call a foregrounding process is really, it's the same process as rooting down, dropping our centre of gravity. It's the same process as releasing tightness in the body. It's the same process of calming the mind through awareness. So we have a sense of the physical body, but also this kind of anchor for our minds, so that the feeling of stillness doesn't go away. We can cultivate that, or at least in theory, it doesn't go away. It's simple, but it's not easy. But we have an anchor point. We have something that we can return to. So letting your hands drop down. 3 treasures of Tai Chi: body, mind, and energy. So the physical body, the awareness and intention, and the movement itself. These 3 things, they're really 3 parts of the same whole. We want them to blend together, to harmonize. So with your weight more back in your hips, palms of your hands facing forwards, easing forwards, rotating. Bird folds its wings. So it would be nice to think that we never lost these qualities. I think inevitably we do. Our minds get distracted, we tense up in our bodies, and so on and so forth. So one useful thing is to notice with these movements that there are moments when we can settle, and we can define those fairly closely. When our weight is more in our feet, when our weight is more in our hips, and we can take just a moment to remember that intention, to settle, to release. So that, again, settling, releasing, quietening, stilling, become a normal part of our movements, rather than something that we'll do when we have time. Also perhaps realising that the actual application of that intention takes almost no time whatsoever. Feeling the flow of the movement, particularly in the upper part of your body, perhaps recalling that image of bathing or massaging. Maybe aware of areas that feel a bit sort of distant, blocked or a bit tight. And you can have an intention to let the movement, for instance, massage those areas to gradually release the tightness. And then in the forward position, palms of your hands facing back, fisherman cast the net. The main movement, the main energy comes from that sinking down and the subsequent push up, both in feet and in hips. Like a wave coming up that then gets directed through our body via the center of our body. Just noticing as your arms swing through, forwards, they naturally curve up. And once again, can you bring a quality of attention to your upper body and note, where do you feel the effect of that swing up? The patterns follow a fairly regular rhythm of expansion and contraction in all the tissues of the body, really. Maybe even including our bones. Remember, it's often the case that these smaller changes within the body, the bricks and mortar of the bigger movements, are the ones that we're more likely to be able to influence intentionally. We could use imagery, we could use simple awareness, we could use memory to actually aid that process. So I'm leaving your arms out, coming back, feeling the movement now, rising up through belly and chest, rolling the ball in towards your body. Try and avoid, at least to begin with, lifting your arms. You're pulling on the ball. But noticing that movement from your feet. Remember, we did this before, and eventually your shoulders going back, so it goes up by your belly, solar plexus, your chest. Again, like a wave coming up, and we can let the arms ride that wave, coming up maybe a little bit higher. Going back to the idea that we can begin to direct the movement, the energy to certain parts of the body, that will be very influenced by which exercise we're on. Some exercises lend themselves more readily to particular parts of the body. And then into pigeon spreads its wings, turning your hands palm in, drawing your elbows apart, feeling that lovely expansion, particularly in your chest, which then contracts, seeming to pull your arms back in. And if we can bring a degree of attention to the upper part of our back, between the shoulder blades, we'll feel the same pattern of expansion and contraction, the opposite way round. These movements move our arms for us, taking the strain away from shoulders and arms and allowing for this flow of movement. One more time. But this is quite a sort of powerful movement, but this time coming into pushing wave, a more economical, kind of denser, stronger quality to it. This image of pushing. But we can think of pushing against something, water for instance, or a heavy door, a supermarket trolley. But we can also think of being pushed because we sink into our hips. We feel that response with the rising energy upwards, pushing the upper body forwards, tilting on the hips, and then from the feet back. And as we get more familiar and more experienced in these arts, it's that latter movement that we want to bring the emphasis to, so that gradually you begin to feel these movements working from the inside out, generated within the body, generated from that contact with the ground, expressed through our upper body and arms. Now combining this with the stepping, so the weight slip to one side, step out with the opposite foot, plant the foot, press forward. Notice if there's an urge to rush here. Come back, remember that sensation of bringing your foot in, bring it back on the ground, your body shifting and turning, stepping and planting the foot and then pushing forwards. You may well find that you've got a very strong urge. You get to about here and you're already wanting to push forwards. But remember, we're trying to normalise a quality of stillness. We can achieve that through paying attention to the details. Giving ourselves just a moment at the end of each stage of the movement, here and here, to settle in. These are the points that I sometimes describe as being like the comma in the sentence. They don't break the flow, but they stop the flow taking over. They take us further from that feeling that we can have so easily. We're sort of running downhill, can't quite get to stop. And then rolling your fingers into a hollow fist, that is going straight forwards and back. This is quite a complex movement because we've got the weight moving and the upper body turning. We've got that sense of expansion. And it's quite interesting to consider where we feel the expansion and contraction. But we also have this subtle rotation of our arms from our shoulders. So there is internal patterns of expansion and contraction. They get quite complex. One more time, going forwards, open your fingers, coming back again, opening in the front of your body, drawing in, and then pressing forwards. Again, as your arms drop down here, it's just that moment of settling into the ground. Then we have the energy to push out with. Maybe having a sense of, as we push, what we're pushing against and feeling that energy flowing into our arms, into the palms of our hands, back into the hips and the legs, and then up through the back, and once again, to arms and hands. This time, turning your hands palm down, turning your hips, go forwards and lengthening through your back and then out through your arms and your fingers, turning around the other side and coming back. Changing directions, polishing the table. One more time. Turning your hands palm up, settling down into your hips, feeling this pressure to an extent in your feet, but also in hips, buttocks, lower back. And then once again, the push up, down into the ground, but also upwards, pushing your arms up. So this link between what's happening in our arms and hands and what's happening in our legs and feet. Here it's like you're lifting a ball, the ball's being lifted, and then press down. This time, change into the wild goose, rotating your hands out. If the image of the bird in flight adds something to the movement, well and good. But remember, not all images will work for you all the time. And perhaps a stage in development here is that in some cases we might dispense with the image. Sometimes they can be useful, but maybe we can find a direct pathway between mind, body and energy, not needing the intermediary of the image. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't come back to the images when they're required, when they're useful, by the way, but maybe not relying on them quite so much. So I'm going forward, feeling that settling in the feet. Roll back, feel the settling in your hips, and then the push up. This is parting the clouds. So the reason we go forwards is just to give clearance for our arms and hands to swing in front of our knees. We don't need to do that in the standing version of the exercise. But almost sort of serendipitously, the way of doing this in the chair leads us to a strong awareness of coming back into our center before we push out. Yang comes from yin, leads back into yin, which in its turn leads into yang. And these are not paired opposites, but two aspects of the same thing. Take away one aspect and you would no longer have the movement. So that yin element, as we might call it, we might describe the stillness, the silence, the rooting, the foregrounding as the yin aspect of any particular movement, is actually essential to the whole movement. And when we can recognise that again, stillness, calmness are not optional luxuries, but rather essentials in our lives. It's an encouragement to, once again, normalise them. Same thing here, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. You sink into the centre, bring your attention to one side of the body for the expanding element. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky, winding the arm down, pulling down. Tension coming once again to the centre of your body and then to the opposite side. Just ask yourself, how long is it actually taking to come back into your centre? Even though we're exaggerating it slightly, you could barely count the seconds. It's not even a second, is it? So that makes a bit of a nonsense of the idea that we don't have time for this quality of stillness, spaciousness. One more on each side. Bring both hands in, lightly touching the inside of your arm to the side of your centre. From there, expanding out. And then coming back, and once again, seeing if you can just touch the sides of your centre, feeling that compression in the centre part of your body, and as it expands, directing the movement sideways. So again, another aspect of this is that there's an element of waiting. We're not in a hurry to move on. We have enough experience to know that it's going to happen. So rather than think, I've got to go now, we wait until we feel that wave-like movement arising. Not forcing the movement, but cultivating. One more round. Extending one foot, let it rest on the heel. Turn your hands palm forwards. Tilting the centre of the body forwards, but feeling your hips drop back, so your back lengthens again. The hips dropping back, draw you back, and expanding in the front of your body. Arms coming down, settling your hips once again before you extend out. That feeling that we get in our hips from dropping towards the ground, actually really creating the gentle pull that means that we can bring our shoulders, bring our arms, bring our heads up with a lot less strain. We'll look again at that standing exercises. And then again, a hollow fist and grasping the tiger's ears. Your hips anchor you to the ground. Feet anchor you to the ground. And it's that anchoring that gives you the freedom to extend gently through your back and your arms for movements like this. Once again, an example of that stillness enabling movement. Change sides. Scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. So The stillness enables the movement, and the movement enables the stillness. So, if you're ready to stand, rubbing your hands together, and then just tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder, your arm. On the other side. Upper part of your chest. A useful little exercise, this very easy to remember, to practice, down to your belly, and very useful to give you that quality of foregrounding, your awareness of your body, your legs. Also preparing the body physically to stand. Pushing your heels up. And then push up and circle around. And back the other way. And then push your heels down. Take a moment to settle in. Feel your weight dropping into your hips, into your feet. And then pushing up. And using that push up to help you come into the standing position. And once you stand up, just taking a moment once again to settle. Getting your stance right, feet below your hips, toes pointing forwards. And just move the chair out of the way. Your weight a little bit forwards in your feet. Encouraging your hips to drop back. Yielding to the pull of gravity and then letting them drop down a little bit more. And again, feeling that expansion in the legs, pushing down into the ground, pushing your upper body up. So the whole of the body expands and contracts. And once again, we get that sense of the movement flowing through the whole of the body, the energy flowing through the whole of the body. Bringing your hands around as though you're cradling the ball. Letting your weight, your center of gravity sink and pushing up, rooting down. So rooting means that we can both drop our center of gravity here and benefit from the stability that gives us, and also is the necessary prelude to the expansion upwards, which in its turn leads to the downward rooting move. Once again, at the end of each stage, expansion and contraction, there's a moment of settling. This is when your arms rotate here and here. And then the wild goose. And then parting the clouds. Good. Turn one foot out, step forward with the other, transferring the weight. So ideally, we would never lose that quality of stillness in the movement. They're interlinked, and so, two parts of the same whole. In practice, of course, we do. We veer from one thing to another, particularly into the more active aspect of it. But we can begin to recognize here, I've drawn your attention to those points of change. The point at which the stage finishes can be just that moment of settling. Remember, it's to do with intention, and intention is quicker than thought. So there's no sense in which we haven't got time for this. And that's important, that we recognise it only takes a moment, and probably means that the activity goes better. So we can begin to recognise that maybe we've just done the washing up, and then we've got to, I don't know, do something else. I can't think. But rather than sort of finishing the washing up and dashing, it's like finish the washing up, take a moment to settle, then go off and do what you need to do. As you settle, raising your toes, front toes. Foot can turn out slightly. As you settle in the front, the back knee goes in. More of your weight beginning to settle in to one foot. And then we can bring in the step in. Bring the foot in, step out with the front foot, heel, ball, the foot, plant the foot. Same thing with the back foot, except that it's the ball of the foot goes down first, then the heel, then the planting, and then the weight. Then with the other foot forwards. Same thing, first of all, fixed step. Notice if there's a sudden urge to, you've got to get into the stepping. But no, each stage has its benefit. Each stage is worthy of attention and leads us to the next stage if we give it that attention. The urge to rush, to dash from one thing to another, is what is normalized in our culture. What we're trying to do is to recognize that there's nothing wrong with being active, but actually we can normalize the stillness as well. We're more likely to experience it in our daily lives. Now you can begin to raise your toes and your heel. Again, aware of your posture, aware of your alignment, aware of your root, and bringing into that a sense of discrimination. Is there anything you want to change? Bring the foot in, are you tight in the hip? Is your shoulder slightly out of line? So that stillness is useful, it can help us. And step through, forwards or backwards. And then change direction. Now moving my movements, right foot forwards, the standing version of fisherman cast a net. Again, noticing how our arms gently curve up and where in our upper bodies we feel response to that, or we feel the connection to that in terms of expansion and contraction. Coming forwards, and this time as your arms start to rise up, turning into wind blows the willows. Your arms dropping down, your body contracting, you settle into the back foot, turn, and the body expands. What do you need to do to push your arms away from your body? Not to lift your arms, because they'll swing up quite naturally. Where are the points in your upper body where you can bring a sense of intention to expand into? Where do we sort of direct the movement, the energy? So then, the other foot forwards, starting with fisherman cast in air. Don't rush. And then wind blows the willows. So we're not having to strain for our arms to swing out. That helps us to stay rooted, to stay stable. Very practical outcome of stillness, isn't it? So now, coming forwards, push the back knee in, turn, unless you're going back the other way, and this is doing backwards first of all. Step out, plant the foot, bring the foot in. If you stiffen up in your shoulders, you'll soon start wobbling around, but we don't need to. And what you might find you're able to do, is just come here, just raising your leg. This dragonfly skims the water. Very dynamic, quite challenging movement that is really aided by that awareness of the root that comes from the stillness. I'm going to change direction before I bump into the camera. And bring your feet parallel. Okay, go back to your chairs. Take a moment to settle in. Before we do our closing exercise, this is the last live online session of the year, so thank you to everybody who's attended these sessions, whether it be in person, as some of you are doing at the moment, or whether you're a YouTube visitor, YouTube regular, or maybe both. We're back with live sessions starting the week of the 5th of January. So the first seated one will be on the 6th. This and other films will be up on YouTube as well. So hopefully, if you've had time, you can take some time out to maybe do a few minutes or whatever. But perhaps more to the point, thinking about this application of this quality of stillness. Can we have an intention to maybe for an afternoon or half a day, or while we're doing one particular task, to when we finish, if you've decided that you've got to clean the house or something like that, vacuum one room and take a moment, feel your weight in your feet, it doesn't. I'm not talking about spending hours doing it. Just those few moments of intentional settling, foregrounding your posture. I suggested to a group last night that if you're somebody who uses your phone regularly, quite a lot of people these days just habitually check their phone. They're always checking their phone. Suppose for a day or an afternoon or an hour, you just set yourself the intention that every time you went to check your phone to see if there was a message for you or something like that, before you actually did that, you just spent a moment feeling your weight settle into your feet, and then you go and do it. So again, to normalise this idea that we don't have to dash from one thing to another, to normalise that quality of stillness that we want to find within the movement. Another example of where an active engagement with something, your phone or the house or whatever, actually can become the stimulus for the stillness, which in its turn enhances the activity. And that process of return is really illustrated, I think, very well in this last exercise. The name, Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. Here, there's that emphasis on the return. But you start with your arms at your sides, and that feeling of expansion, pushing your arms out, bringing them around. So you're going to hold a ball against your chest, drawing your hands in, releasing in your hips, in your shoulders, just feeling that returning process, letting the arms rest, and then feeling the rising energy again. Embrace Tiger, return to mountain. One more time. And rest. Once again, thank you very much, everybody. I hope you have, or indeed are having, whenever you watch this, a lovely Christmas and New Year. I look forward to seeing you again in the new year. So bye bye for now.